Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to our TheraPet webinar and questions and answers. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined tonight by Mel Hughes, our CEO, James MacDonald, our chair of the TheraPet committee, Dr. Stuart Donald, who is our chair of animal health, education and legislation. Our special guest tonight is Hazel Tompkins, who is a lecturer in health and safety and hygiene and a long-standing TheraPet volunteer. My name is Diane Wood, and along with my colleagues, I'm also a director of Canine Concerns Scotland Trust. Without further ado, I'd like to hand you over to Mel, who will give you a little rundown of what we're going to be doing tonight. Mel, over to you.
Thanks, Diane. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. I can't see you all, but it's nice to see you virtually. I think what you probably most want to know is where are we at with the charity? We have sent copious amounts of communication out recently, informing you that our services are now back up and running. Now, as you know, we shut down in March 2020, and it was for a lot longer than we had anticipated. So we took a very, very cautious approach to this, and we opened up the resumption of the TheraPet assessments and potential TheraPet assessments on the 9th of August. Then we had a very long debate at a board meeting in the beginning of September about whether or not the time was right now to resume our services. And the reason this was a lengthy debate was that we know many places are now open to you all. You can go out for dinner, you can go to a concert, you can virtually go anywhere you want unless it's particularly overseas. But on the other hand, we still want to be safe. There are still many places that we don't want to visit yet ourselves, perhaps because we have medical conditions and we're not sure about. So it's trying to get that balance. So our board decided that the best thing for us to do was to say to our volunteers, if you are happy to visit, then we are saying, right, we're reopening our services again. And for those places that want us to come and visit, and for those volunteers who are happy to do so, you're now available to do it. So that was the sort of the thinking behind it all. Lots of volunteers have actually said to us, we're not ready yet. We don't feel safe enough because of our own conditions. We don't want to pass the virus on. A lot of people have waited until they're vaccinated. We are not asking people to be vaccinated. But one of the things that we've been hearing from places is that they may ask you to be vaccinated, particularly a care home. So what we've done is we sent out in all of the bump that we sent out recently, there was quite a lot of materials. One of that was our pathway to visiting, the document. Another thing was our volunteer, our updated handbook and our guidelines for visits. And inside all of that, we've put things like information about what you may be required to do when you visit somewhere. You might be required, obviously, to wear a face mask or a face covering, unless you have a medical reason or a reason that's you know, you're wearing a lanyard that you don't have to, you're exempt from wearing a face covering. You may be asked to be vaccinated. And if you're someone who's not able to be vaccinated or has made the decision that that's not for you, then you may not be able to visit that place. And that would probably be more likely to happen in a care home or an NHS type of environment. It may be that you're asked to undertake a lateral flow test. So we're all being asked by the government to take them twice a week, and that's a minimum, just to make sure that we're not carrying the virus, but we're asymptomatic. So I just ordered a new kit myself, and I'm doing them because I'm out regularly doing visits and assessments and things now as well. And I know certainly the people on the screen tonight are also doing the same. So that's something that's very easy to order from your pharmacy or online. You can get them and they're delivered within sort of 48 hours. So you might be asked to do that. And certainly feedback that we've been getting from volunteers this week is that particularly if they're going into schools or care homes, they are being asked to check or do a lateral flow test on the morning of the visit or immediately the day before. And sometimes they have to take the proof either on their phone or email, or maybe print it out as a hard copy and show people that they have a negative test. So there's lots of things behind the scenes that you might not think about when you're visiting. So what we're going to suggest is if you might have started back, you might not feel ready yet, If you have started back, fantastic. Let us know how it's going by contacting your area reps or contacting the office if there's no area rep listed for you at the moment, because we do have some changes this year. If you feel that there's lots and lots of questions that's not answered tonight, you can come back to us, because the idea is we're going to have our guest speaker and then we're going to have our questions and answers. Now, there are many places like NHS premises, for instance, around Scotland that are still not willing to let us in yet. Within each region of Scotland, our area reps and myself, we've been contacting people like the care home managers and the volunteer coordinators in hospitals and in other areas, but we've also been contacting schools and school teachers, and some of you have been doing that yourselves. What we're finding is that across Scotland, it varies. And right now, the NHS boards are pretty much all saying we're not quite there yet. They may consider some non-clinical environments, but that again is usually on a case-by-case basis, and they might give priority to outdoor visiting. Hospitals, yep, so at the moment, it depends. If it's a psychiatric hospital, we might be more likely to get in sooner than somewhere where there's particular clinical care required. Now, with schools, it's been very varied around the country. So if you're a volunteer that has been going into schools in the past and you wish to do so again, contact the school and find out. In the last week or two, some have been opening up a little bit more, but the government had said to them for the first 6 weeks or so of schools, there will be no visiting. So some schools are opening now, and we have had some visitors in the last week, which is great. And they've actually really enjoyed having the dogs back in. We're also opening up our Pause Against Stress sessions, and we've had some of them have taken place already. You'll see them, we've listed them on our social media sites, so you can keep track of us there and see what's happening. And we've got a few more planned in the next few weeks around the country as well. In addition to that, Aberdeen Airport, we're going to be doing a sort of a pilot, really, just to get pilot, pardon the pun, that wasn't intended. So Diane, who's our chair tonight, she was her and one of her other area reps in Aberdeen, they're going to go and just do a quick recce basically around Aberdeen and just check that in the airport things are set out to be COVID secure as possible. Because what we want is that when we reopen these things, and the partners that we work with and the organisations that we work with, we want you to be as comfortable as possible when you are going back in to visit somewhere. And that means that we have to have communication and discussions with those partnership organisations. So a lot of that's necessary. You might be asked to contact these places yourself as well to make sure you're happy and you understand. And obviously, we want to make sure that the dogs are happy too, because the biggest thing here is that the dogs haven't done this for over 18 months. So you have to be confident that your dog and your cat, if it's a therapet that's a cat, has the attitude and is more adjusted to seeing people in masks and is quite happy to go back in. You might find that when you start visiting, your visits are a bit shorter. You might have to cut them short because the dog is just taking a little bit longer to adjust. Don't be frightened to speak up and say those things when you are in your places and visiting, because it's all brand new to everybody again, and routines are all different. So getting used to that is going to be a big change for the dogs and the cats as much as it is for us. So please put yours and their health and well-being first, and don't feel under any pressure to do anything that you're not sure about. And again, if there's any issues, come back to us and ask us. Even if you're somewhere and you're not sure, pick up the phone and phone the office if it's office hours, or phone myself or your area rep, and we'll try and get to you as soon as possible. So that's all I'm going to say just now. If you've got any more questions, you can ask them at the end, but because there's lots and lots of information I could tell you, but that would be information overload. So I'll pass back to Diane. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Mel. Just before I hand over to Hazel, I'd just like to say, if you look at the bottom of your screens, ladies and gentlemen, you'll see a Q&A box. If you'd like to put any questions into the Q&A box, after Hazel has spoken, we'll be then addressing those questions, and our panelists will be able to answer them. So if you've got any questions, please pop them into the box, and we'll answer your questions then. And without further ado, I am going to hand over to Hazel, and there we go. Hazel, over to you.
Hello. Hi, everybody. I'm delighted to be giving you a wee sort of overview on some hygiene points that you might find useful when you're going back to visiting. I've just Firstly, Dan, can I have the next one, please? I just put this up because when I received all the information, because I'm a volunteer as well, I thought it was really brilliant, and it'd be great if everybody just went and reviewed what we've been sent, because there's very comprehensive info in the emails that have been sent out to us for all the different things that we might be doing. So that's maybe reading with dogs, or whether we're out pause for stress, or whatever we're doing. So that would be my first thing, because I found it extremely useful myself, and it's all there for us to have a look at. And I think it's quite good to review that when you're going back out, because we maybe got sent that a while back. So I would advise everybody to have a look at that before you do your visits, just as Mel was saying. So thanks, Dan. Next one, please. Thank you. So I looked at the government recommendations, and like all recommendations, these are changing all the time, and I'm probably going to repeat some of the things that Mel has said and things that you have seen yourselves, but the precautions that we need to take are still the same. And having been out on a visit yesterday with James, my first visit with the dog for a long time, I was incredibly impressed with the setup where we went, and I think that's going to be the same wherever we do go. And I didn't feel in any way worried about going to do the visit. The dog was really relaxed about it, and people were doing their hand sanitizing and all the things they had to do. So I think that was great for me to see that. So I looked at the government recommendations, and I know that Stuart will be able to corroborate this when he maybe comes back with some questions and answers. But basically, we're going to look at general hygiene measures. So these are the things that we've always done about hand washing, but making sure that we're wearing the masks if we need to go into places, that we're taking all the precautions that we need to do. Hand washing is really the take-home message. We've had this drummed into us over the last 18 months, and it's really important. Ever talking about hygiene, ironically, people are not getting sick from other things at the moment because they're washing their hands a lot. And it will be a fantastic new world that we now enter into, where we don't get sick because hand washing is now just taken to be something that everybody does a lot more regularly. So making sure that you're washing your hands, making sure that you're using your sanitising product, and then you'll have your own hand stuff that you'll take in with you. I know where we went yesterday, there was lots of sanitising products there for people, and people were being encouraged to do it before they touch the dogs and after they touch the dogs. So this is to make sure that we're doubly protected, and nobody had a problem with that whatsoever, because we're doing it now all day. Avoid touching your eyes, nose or mouth until your hands are thoroughly washed, which we know. We're wearing masks, but we're hand washing and sanitising all the time. So these are things that are now second nature. In the past, you were saying to people and they probably weren't doing it as much, but they are now. Thanks, Diane. So quite often people are asking, can I catch coronavirus from my pet, from dogs and cats? And there is very little evidence to suggest that COVID-19 is transmitted from humans to a dog or cat or vice versa. It just is known now that mainly transfer of COVID is going to be through airborne droplets of the virus. So it's something to bear in mind and not to be particularly worried about. If you are washing your hands and if you are sanitising your hands, and the people that are touching your dogs are doing the same, then the risk is going to be negligible and not something that you should to be worried about at all. So if an animal is touched by someone with the virus, there is a potential, but we are talking about people touching our dogs when we're in environments that have washed their hands and used sanitising products. So the chances of this are even slimmer because of that. Also, there would have to be a large volume of virus on somebody's hands. They'd have to have coughed or sneezed into their hand. They'd then need to touch the animal. You would then need to touch to pick up a large viral load from the animal and then to ingest it into your own body. So all of these things are extremely statistically improbable. So I think it's something that people have worried about, and I don't think they need to worry about it. If you're following the rules, the basic rules of hand hygiene, wearing your masks and being sensible about what you do, then that is something that you shouldn't need to be worried about. Okay, thank you. So a little bit about COVID, and people know about this. It's a virus, and there are a lot of coronaviruses. It's a large family of viruses, respiratory viruses, cold and flu illnesses that people get, and it has been around a long time. But just to reiterate, some coronaviruses, such as feline and canine strains, can infect only animals and not humans, so they're not going to be passed. At this time, there's no evidence that domestic animals are playing a significant role in spreading this virus. So that's just something else for you to take off in your mind for not to be a worry for you. So important to remember that, because I think people do get concerned about that. Okie dokie, thank you. So good hygiene practices. And if you haven't got a lovely shower cap for your dogs, I think that's something maybe that we should look into for the therapet. Maybe get a yellow one. So ensure your leashes and your any harnesses, anything, scarves, coats, and anything are washed between visits. You probably do that anyway, but it's a good thing to do, and it's an ideal opportunity for you to invest in a new coat or scarf, which will help to put more funds into the coffers. So just think about that. Remove after visits and wash and clean appropriately. I have actually bought a new collar and lead, and just because it was nice to do, it was a good excuse. And I'm going to keep it in a little plastic bag for my visits. So this is a treat for the dog. She gets a new collar and lead. But there's no evidence that the virus would be spreading from the skin or fur of your companion animals, and it's very unlikely on if you're washing your hands and using the sanitizing gels, which is the take-home message that would be passed on the leads or harnesses. But belt and braces, just make sure that they're clean before you go in, and then that's a worry less for you as well. Okie dokie. So when I'm talking about hygiene, I always talk about the 6 steps to hand washing. So I've just altered this into paw washing. It was very difficult to get a picture of a dog that could keep its paw inside a pot, but it is possible, because I tried it with my own dog who recently got a sting from a jellyfish, and the vet recommended 15 minutes of soaking the paw in a bowl, which I thought was highly improbable that I would ever manage 15 minutes, but we did get about 3. So 6 steps to hand washing. It's just about thinking about, I think at the beginning of COVID, they talked about singing happy birthday and all this sort of stuff. But the main thing is that you wash your hands properly. Make sure that you wash the palms, make sure you wash in between your fingers, your nails, up onto your wrists, the backs of your hands, just for yourself and for any concerns that you've got before or after the visits. So just take your time to do that. Make sure you wash them carefully, make sure you dry them, and make sure you put on your hand sanitizing gel, and then that's you don't have to think about that until you're leaving the visit, or when people are coming in, they'll have washed their hands and used the gel before they touch the animals. Okie dokie, thank you. So before you go to your visit, and this is all in all of the really great information that was sent to us, but make sure, and Mel has already said that, so I'm probably just going over this again, but make sure that you contact and find out what the situation is going to be if you're nervous about that. Make sure that they're going to have a system for people having to sanitize their hands. Make sure that everybody that you go to visit has done a risk assessment, and you've made them comfortable with the fact that you have taken all the steps. And we can send things out to them, I'm sure, or you can actually send them information that you've got. And the lateral flow thing is quite important. I did it before I went out with James yesterday for the visit, and it's quite nice for you as well, because I wouldn't like to think I was going somewhere and I inadvertently had taken something in. So basically it's the same rules for everything. If you've got symptoms, then you should be testing and not going, especially in places with vulnerable people, although I think that would be something that you would discuss with your end user before you went in. So the guidelines are changing, but as long as we know what we're meant to do, and as long as we contact where we're going first, find out what they are suggesting, and make them confident with what we're going to be doing as well, and take your own things with you to make sure that you're going to be okay about yourself. Take your own gels and take your own sprays and whatever, and make sure that you feel confident before you go in. So that's the message from that. Contact before you go. Okie dokie. So just to kind of reiterate on all the things, and it's things that you all know already, but read and understand the risk assessments, and just do it before you go for the visit, because then it makes me feel quite confident. I think, oh, this is what I've got to do. Make sure that you've got everything organised before you go, and then when you go in, you don't have to worry about it. So planning and organising. Follow the protocols in place before, during and after your visits, and this is not just our protocols that we've got from the therapet side of things, but also wherever you're going, they will have their own, and make sure that you understand that and that you're very comfortable with that, and that you are following these things as well, so that they're confident with you going in. So maybe a little checklist is quite good. I do like a checklist. Make sure you've got everything you need, that you've got whatever you're going to be going into, that you've got your dog necessities, that you've got everything in your pack, your personal hygiene requirements, and that you're ready to roll. And we had a great time yesterday, and it was really lovely to be back out. And the dogs, well, Twiggy just loved it and just morphed back into how it had been before. And I think that'll be the same for most of you guys. It was really fantastic. It was a fantastic moment to be back out there. So enjoy when you do get back out to visit your guys. And that's me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hazel. Now I'm going to open up our panelists' mics, and I've got some questions that have come in. So what I'm going to do is start with Mags Easton. What's the best social media platform for Therapet? Who would like to answer that one? James, you're the social media person.
We are trying to cover all the social media platforms so that any of the following are available to you. We duplicate everything, and it normally points back to the website. So we are on Facebook. We have got 2 accounts on there, Therapet and Canine Concern. The same on Twitter. We've got 2 accounts if you use Canine Concern or Therapet. And we are on Instagram, which is just the 1 account, Therapet. So it's covering most of the social media platforms, and everything's duplicated onto all the platforms. And of course, there's a website as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next up, I have a question from Fiona Watts. If I'm offered a large space for a pause session, for example, a dining hall or a gym, can I take more than 4 dogs? Who would like to answer that? James or Stuart?
Okay, I'll answer that again. I mean, it depends. The format for the Pause Against Stress, Fiona, as you know, is to create a circle of chairs so that the dog can be in along with the volunteers. Now, initially, this year anyway, what we'd like to cut the number of dogs round number of students or staff around any one dog down to 3 plus the volunteer. So we're bringing the number of students or staff down by 1 per dog to cut down the number in the room. If you could get a wheelchair in between the circles of chairs, that's how you would work it out for the Pause Against Stress event. The event Hazel was talking about yesterday, we only had 3 dogs because that's all we needed to take. But you could do the same thing in that sense. The key thing with the Pause Against Stress events is ventilation. Do not hold the Pause Against Stress event in a room that we cannot open windows. Okay, hope that answers the question.
Super, thank you very much. This is not a question, this is a comment for you, James. This is from Ruth Davis. It's, can I just say to James, my sister-in-law works in Barhead High, Gillian Davis. She's been singing your praises, James. You and your beautiful dogs are their favourite visitors. How lovely. Now, I've got another question here, and is about hand sanitizer, and this has come in from Sheena Clark. This is a question about visits such as Pause for Stress, where there'll be a lot of adults, presumably with all using various hand sanitizers. I know there are some highly scented and of some varying strength. My concern is the effect of these could have on the dog's fur and skin. Should Canine Concern recommend a particular brand that we should bring with us? Stuart, can you?
Probably I should answer that one, yeah. I don't think we're in a position to recommend as such. Yeah, clearly I think the common sense would tell you that it would be better to have one that didn't have a lot of sort of added scents and things, you know, and that the the sanitizer was there just to do its job, not to have any sort of cosmetic effect. However, I think the chances of the sanitizer causing any sort of skin problems on the dog would be very, very slight indeed, unless the dog had a history of, skin allergy in the past, in which case I think you would need to be a wee bit careful about that. But a lot of the hand sanitizers, by the time you've rubbed them into your hands properly, if you've done it according to what Hazel was saying in her talk, any sort of the active principle probably evaporated anyway. I don't mean the principle that's killing the bacteria or killing the pathogens, but the carrying medium and things like that, which are the things that would be likely to cause any allergy in the dog. So I think unless the message is probably that unless your dog has a history of skin disease, I think it's very, very unlikely that people handling the dog, having very recently used hand sanitizer themselves, is likely to cause any problem.
Okay, super. Thank you, Stuart. Just another question really about hand sanitizers. I guess each of us have to take our own hand sanitizer, so we really shouldn't be giving our hand sanitizers to others. Is that a fair point? Yeah. Hazel, yes.
I mean, when we were yesterday at the event, they had a large well, they had 2 or 3 bottles of hand sanitizer. So I mean, the students that were the people that were coming in were automatically stopping, and they were asked to put the sanitizer on before. So there's a good chance that they're going to be using the one that's provided. In most places, I haven't been anywhere in recent times that hasn't had hand sanitizer, so you're just going to use what's there. I mean, I do carry my own for myself, but you can go from one shop to the next and put on hand sanitizer even though you haven't touched them. I think we've now become quite conditioned to use it, and I don't think that's really ever going to be an issue.
Okay, that's super. Thank you, Hazel. James, can I come across to you for comment?
Yes, we need to be careful that when we're running Pause Against Stress event, the host provides the sanitizer, not a Canine Concern Scotland Trust or Therapet. It's the host that do that, because the sanitizer is going on the students or the commercial premises staff's hands that we're going on. So it's up to them. They will have ran the rules and regulations on that. We do not put sanitizer on people's hands, and that's the same as when we're in care homes or our everyday work. We do not put sanitizer on service users or residents' hands. I know that's everyone will be thinking that, but I'm just putting it out there. Okay, thank you.
Stuart, did you have your hand raised? Do you have a comment on that?
I did, but I did that by mistake. So
all right, okay, that's
I
fine.
Sorry.
Sorry about that.
No.
I have a question here from April Ponton. Just curious, you mentioned some new collars and leads, etc. Are there any specific Therapet ones that can be purchased through the charity? And her dog Bailey is super excited to start visiting again. So we don't have any leads specific to be purchased, do we? No.
No, we don't have any specific leads and collars, just purely because usually by the time people come and register with us, they have their own. But we do have the Therapet lead flashes. So obviously when you're going out on your visit, remember, dig out your name pass as well. If you need to have your membership updated before you can start any visiting. So please do make sure for insurance purposes that you have paid your membership this year. Take that card with you. If you're going somewhere for the first time, they might ask to see your PVG as well. So bear that in mind too. But we do also have for sale the Therapet bandanas and the Therapet coats, which just say Therapet on them and they're in bright yellow. Unfortunately, they're not in matching yellow because we couldn't get that with the suppliers, but they're on our website, and if you phone the ladies in the office, they'll be happy to talk you through the sizes, and the pricing and everything's on the website too.
Okay, super. Thank you so much. Ruth Davis, are there any Therapet masks for humans, not dogs?
No, funnily enough, Ruth, I know you sent me that in an email, and I was looking at it today. There are so many companies out there doing it, and it can be anything up to £20 per mask, depending on what you want to buy and the quality. So if you know of a good supplier, somebody who would do it for us for a reasonable price, if anybody's got any contacts, let me know. But it's a huge undertaking. How long we'll be wearing masks for it, we don't know. I mean, it would have to be something that was worth our while to do if we had lots of volunteers wanting it, but we could investigate it.
Okay, cool, thank you. I've a question here from Jill Harris. I will be visiting a number of different places. They all want us back. I'm currently taking a lateral flow test twice a week. Is this sufficient to cover all the places I visit? Who would like to take that one? Stuart, James? Stuart.
I would think it probably is. I mean, if the criteria of a particular care home is to have 2 lateral flow tests in the preceding week, and the criteria for another care home that you're visiting in the same week is exactly the same, you know, the number of lateral flow tests you take is irrelevant as long as you take 2 in the week, you know. So I would think as long as you cover the basics in that, and if one of the 2 care homes has a different set of criteria that is additional to the other one, then you'd have to follow their protocol. But we should be guided by the care, as James said already, and indeed what Hazel said too. We should be guided by what the requirements of the care homes or the place you're visiting anyway, what their protocol is.
Okay, and the other thing, just to reiterate to all our volunteers, that they are only supposed to visit 1 premises per day. You can't go round 2 or 3 care homes, it's 1 per day. Now, another question here. Can my dog get COVID from infected people? Can my dog pass on COVID to a vulnerable person in a care home? I think we kind of touched on that, but if you want to just repeat on that, Stuart, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, everything that Hazel said in her talk, I agreed with every mortal thing that she talked about. It's just, you know, we have now a bit of the benefit of hindsight as well after, you know, 18 months of COVID. And any sort of suspicion that we might have had in the early stages about COVID being passed from humans to dogs or vice versa, I think have been largely, you know, allayed. There have been experimental studies done mainly in America, and what these have shown is that whereas there may be a chance of a very remote chance in experimental conditions, not in live conditions, that COVID could be passed from humans to dogs, it's very, very unlikely that it would work the other way. It's essentially a human disease and not a zoonotic one. So I think, you know, with the passage of time, we can be much more confident in saying that as opposed to maybe a year or 15 months ago.
Okay, thank you so much. Another question here, this is directed for you, Stuart. How important are canine vaccination boosters, and what happens if my dog's boosters have been lapsed? How do I go about getting him or her revaccinated?
Yeah, well, it's very important to keep canine vaccinations up to date. I mean, apart from anything else that's in the requirement of the canine concern, it's in our Therapet health protocol, and there's a reason for that. And the reason is that it's to protect first and foremost your dog from canine diseases, and also to reduce any possibility of what we call zoonotic spread, which is, you know, spread from animals to man. Most of the vaccinations that your dog gets are canine diseases. The only one that isn't really, that could cause the disease in humans is leptospirosis, and there's various serotypes of lepto. Some of the vaccines cover 2 serotypes, some cover 4. The more modern ones cover 4. So it is, you know, we have a sort of moral duty, I think, from the point of view of our dog's health, but also from the moral duty to visiting homes and for honouring the ethos of canine concern and therapy as well, to keep your dog's vaccination up to date. Most of the canine diseases that are covered, i.e. distemper, parvo, infectious canine hepatitis, the ones that are really canine diseases, they only require a vaccination every 3 years. So if your dog has had a booster for these 3 diseases within the last 3 years, then there's no worry. You know, it'll come up again, you know, within that 3-year period for the booster for that. Leptospirosis, lepto as we call it for short, has to be done every year. So that is probably where most of the problems are going to arise if your dog isn't up to date with its vaccination. Now, there is a bit of debate about the time beyond the annual booster as to when you should and should not have your dog revaccinated, you know, have the course started again. I think the gold standard would be if you know, your dog's booster ran out over three months beyond the period, so i.e. 15 months from the last lepto jag, then you would need to start the course again. I think the feeling, I think, amongst the veterinary profession in general is using a bit of common sense, and also from the fact that we're dealing with a biological system. You know, it's so there's obviously going to be biological variation between dogs. That 6 months might be a more realistic and acceptable period, but 3 months, we should aim for 3 months. If you do have to have your dog vaccinated again, a new course started, then the only jag that you need to go back for 2 jags for would be the lepto. The other 3 diseases would just require 1 disease. So if you were beyond the 3 years with, say, distemper, parvo and infectious canine hepatitis, you would only need 1 shot for that. If you were beyond the 1 year or beyond the 15 months, 18 months with the lepto, you would probably have to have 2 lepto shots, about a fortnight or 4 weeks apart, depending on your vet says. But I think you should take your advice from your own individual vet in that particular situation. But that's what the data sheets say. Some of your vets might have some different thoughts on that. I mean, I'm been retired a number of years now, but I think I'm pretty much up to date as far as that's concerned. But I still would urge you to speak to your own vet. On the subject of contact with your vets, while I've got the floor here, I think most practices now are in a position to be able to offer, vaccinations. There is no stipulation from the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons, which is our governing body, to say that we have to attend to emergencies only, which is what the ruling at the beginning of the outbreak in 2020. So I think most vets will be seeing all sorts of different cases now, albeit that an awful lot of practices are still seeing people outside. They're still asking people to remain in the car park or remain in their cars, and they will go out and take the history in the car park, and then take the dog into the consulting room, do the examination, do the necessary treatment, and then bring the dog back out to the car park again, and then recount what their findings are to the client. A lot of people don't like that, of course, but that's the way it has to be. Some practices now, though, again, the Royal College and also the British Veterinary Association have given leeway to practices to say, well, it's up to you as a practice to decide, using your own sort of risk assessments, what you're prepared to do. And I know that some practices will allow people into the consulting room again.
Okay. That's super. Thank you so much, Stuart.
Sorry, I was just going to say something. Another wee thing, Diane, and that was about you know, if there's a backlog of vaccinations, certainly I think most practices are giving vaccinations, but Mel was telling us the other night that she knows of a practice where they have a 3-month backlog, you know, to catch up on their vaccinations. You know, I suppose the answer to that is to go and maybe get if you're desperate to get the booster done because the time is running out, to see if somebody else will do it. That kind of betrays, you know, the sort of professional etiquette between practices, but it might be necessary if you want to get started again. But you know, I think there's a moral issue there, perhaps. Okay, thanks.
No, don't switch your microphone off yet. Another question for you,
Okay.
specific for you, Stuart. How important is it to have my dog regularly treated for fleas and worms?
Very important indeed. Very important indeed. You know, of the most likely transmission of any disease from dogs to humans in care homes or in any situation where TheraPet works, it's not so much you know, the infectious disease, but it's parasitic disease. You know, particularly fleas, of course, and you know, fleas can jump on and off all over the place, and they can jump onto to people, and not just onto people, but they can get into carpets and everything as well. So you know, we would hate that to think that a TheraPet was taking in fleas to a care home. Lice tend to be more species specific. You know, you get a dog louse and you get a cat louse and you get a human louse, but fleas will jump from one to the other. Some of the worms as well, you know, the tapeworms particularly can transmit to humans too. So it's very, very important to be on a regime where external and internal parasites are covered on a regular basis. But this should be part of the, you know, the annual health check you have with your vet anyway. You know, you're going to your vet for a booster. It's not just the booster as well, you know, it's the annual health check, and the annual health check is every bit as important as the vaccinations and the preventive disease, you know, prevention of fleas and lice and ticks and things like that. And that, you know, brings you on to whether the dog is actually fit to actually go to a care home as well. I mean, and that might well be the case now too, because time has elapsed since, you know, 18 months is quite a long time span in the life of a 12, 13-year-old dog with arthritis or some other chronic disease, and so therefore it might be a good idea just to, at the time of the, well, it's not a good idea, I think it's almost mandatory that, you know, you should discuss the suitability of the pet's health and age, etc., for resuming visits, all the visits that we do, whether it's schools, care homes, prisons, whatever, you know.
Super, thank you very much for answering that. I have another question here from Ashona Morris. In a care home setting, should we restrict visits to main sitting area, or can we visit people in their own rooms? If so, should we limit how many we visit? James, do you want to take that one?
Well, the care homes are being restrictive towards that themselves. What a lot of the care homes are doing is putting you into an area and with a few residents, to be honest, just make sure the golden rule at this moment in time is the residents or the service users are cleaning their hands with a sanitizer by the person from the care home who's there with you before they touch the dog, and as long as that's okay, once they finish touching the dog, their hands are cleaned again by the carer who's with you, and you can see as many residents or service users as you see fit. If you are able to wear a face mask, I would suggest that's what you do. And as long as you feel comfortable doing that, that's fine. The only thing in a care home, we're battling a bit to get ventilation in a care home because they want to keep them as warm as possible. So you might have to watch the dog, that the dog is not getting too warm in that sense. But It's as many as the care home will allow you. We have checked up on this, and care homes that are allowing us in they just want smaller groups rather than you going round the care home. So it's minimalising the risk.
Okay, super. Thank you. Mel.
Sorry, I couldn't find mute. Just to add to that, you'll notice in our pathway document, we had put step 2 and step 3, and step 2 was to do outdoor visits, if that was your preference initially. Obviously, we're getting into slightly colder weather, although today's been particularly good, but we're heading autumn and winter now, so outdoor visits may not always be possible. You may not want to sit outside with your dog on a freezing park bench in their little courtyard that they have in the care home or wherever it is, the school playground, for an hour, because that for you and the dog is going to be most uncomfortable. It won't be for the people who are perhaps coming and spending 5 or 10 or 15 minutes with you, but you have to weigh all that up. So that's why it is important that you have these discussions with the organisations before you go. If necessary, what some people have done, I know one chap has gone and met with, it's a school for autistic children, and he has gone and met with them without the dog and sat down and gone through everything in detail so that he had a really clear understanding in his head before he then went in with the dog to meet the children the first time.
That sounds great. This is not a question, but it's from Jacqueline Lowe. She says, I just wanted to say I've done 2 visits now and it was like we'd never been away. The smiles on the care home residents' faces were quite something. There were tears of joy from some, and the second time I visited, the residents had been eagerly waiting for us. The care home took lots of photographs and there will be a write-up in the local papers in South Aberdeenshire. The staff were overjoyed to see us back too. Some sadness though, as some of the residents were no longer with us. Oh, that's lovely, Jacqueline. Thanks for sharing that. I have another question here. It's been a while since we visited and I'm concerned that my dog might be a little bit nervous. He's also a couple of years older now and his arthritis is maybe getting worse. I don't want to give up, but maybe I should. Anybody, any comments on that? Stuart, James, anybody like to dive in? I'm sure it's a person's personal preference, but
yeah, I think that these are very good points. I mean, I think dogs were very used to. It's interesting to hear the last lady's comment, because nobody hardly, nothing had changed really in the time scale, that they were delighted to see the dogs again. But there will be some dogs, I think, that will genuinely be a wee bit frightened and probably have to relearn in a way the experience of going back into care homes. So I think in that respect, it may be a good idea just to sort of test the water a wee bit and maybe stay for a lesser time than you would have done perhaps beforehand, and just see how things go. I mean, really, I suppose for the last 6 months or year, at the beginning of lockdown, their dogs were losing contact with other dogs and people and things like that, other than the immediate members of the family. But people have been walking in parks and stopping and chatting, and dogs have been interacting much more so in the last wee while again. So it's maybe not the worry that it might have been a wee while ago, but I think people should be mindful of that, and maybe say that at the beginning to the care home manager, whoever's in charge, to say that perhaps we should stay a wee bit for a slightly shorter time this time around to see how things go.
Okay, super. Thank you so much. Coming to you, Mel.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I think what we can do as a charity too is we can come out and do a reassessment of your dog if that's something that you think might be necessary, just to give you a second opinion on what we think as well and meet the dog. Or we can either try and come with you on a visit or buddy you up on a visit as well with someone else. So maybe there's a pair of you going at the same time, just to try and get another opinion as to whether you feel your dog or your cat is up to it. And I think that's something that you sometimes forget about, because you wonder the dog's been doing it for such a long time. Another thing that we sometimes get questions about just now are, my dog's been volunteering now for over a year, and we were wanting to be reassessed to work with children and to go into schools. And Initially, we thought this lockdown was only going to be a very, very short period of time, but because it has been such a long period of time, to satisfy ourselves and you and the groups that we work with, and our insurance, to be frank, what we've done is we've agreed that we'd like everybody to resume visiting for 6 months before we assess any dogs to work with children. So if you've already been working with children prior to lockdown and you're happy to go back into school, great, go for it, if the school will let you. If you were working with children before and you're not sure about your dog, whether they're going to be up to going into the school, maybe what you do is you do some other visiting first with adults and then you go back to the school. But it's entirely, you've got to gauge that with the dog, and we'll help you, as much as we can. But if you're in that category where you were thinking about maybe doing some work with children before lockdown, but hadn't had your dog reassessed and hadn't had your PVG updated, because both those things need to happen, then we'd like you to work for 6 months just to get the dogs and the cats back into the swing of things, and us, because they've got to get used to, us all having face masks on and all these different protocols. And for you as a volunteer, I mean, what that lady Jacqueline was mentioning in her email about, so many people have moved on. And for you too, you've got to think about your own mental health when you're visiting places as well, because lots of people that you knew previously will have moved on in lots of different senses of that phrase. So you have to think about, the care of yourself and your dog as well. So, but if you've got any questions about that, please don't hesitate to contact us.
Okay, super. Thank you, Mel. I'm just going to circle back to Jacqueline's comment about the care home taking lots of pictures. And I guess it's just a little reminder to our TheraPet volunteers that we ourselves are not allowed to take pictures. If the care home decides they want to take pictures of their residents and our TheraPets, that's absolutely fine. But just a reminder, we ourselves do not take pictures. It's not a question, more a comment, and I'm going to circle back to masks on this one. This is from Marion McLeod, not a question, but on James's point about warmth, I don't know about my dog, but I find my standard disposable mask uncomfortable for the time I was there. I've now invested in some N95 masks that I will keep for these visits. I'm also going to leave my jacket in the car. Sophie loved her visit. Going back to masks, it might be worth investigating whether the care homes will allow us with the fabric masks or whether they're going to insist on the disposable masks. So that's maybe something to find out about as well. I'm kind of running out of questions. Has anybody else in our audience, would they like to pop a wee question in the box, or if they'd like to raise their hand, I can maybe allow them to ask their question online, in person. Anybody want to do that? Otherwise, James and Stuart, any comments that you'd like to make before, if nobody else has any questions before we close? Any other comments? Ooh, it's gone silent.
My comment has nothing to do with health or anything like that. It's just as an area rep, I've had one or two inquiries about visiting individuals in their houses, and this is accelerated, I think, because of people feeling lonely during COVID. This is not going to a care home. This is going to on a one-to-one situation in somebody's house with, along with a third party, such as the care worker or whatever. I'm just wondering whether that demand has been extrapolated throughout the country. Mel, you probably James, you'll have the better idea on that one.
Yeah, I think we've seen quite a number of requests, and again, it depends on the volunteer availability. We will put out requests to volunteers, but obviously only the people who are comfortable with doing that and confident and feel secure will then respond to those requests. So I think it's a sort of case-by-case basis at the moment, but there's certainly a lot of people, I was watching something on the news tonight about carers, for instance, and the fact that the unpaid carers, people who've had to look after their family members at home because there's not been the social care system there during lockdown. And I think a lot of those circumstances, that's where they're looking for us to visit. So there's definitely a need for it. There's definitely an increase in mental health support as well. We have had, in addition to that though, remember the office is inundated with inquiries every day at the moment, and we had over 500 people applying, well not applying, but inquiring about being TheraPet volunteers since the start of lockdown right through. So it's definitely, there's going to be a huge demand for the service as things start opening up again. But we just, again, we're just going at a slow and steady pace, and whatever pace suits our service users, and obviously at whatever pace suits you guys. But don't ever feel that you are pushed into something that you're not happy with, and if necessary, discuss it with us. And then of course the area reps will then come back and discuss with us as well if they're not sure.
Okay, super. Thank you, Mel. I'm going to open up the mic to Sharon Fergus, who has a question to ask. Sharon? You should be able to speak now. You're on mute, Sharon.
Okay, unmute, that's it.
There you go.
Yeah, I discovered before lockdown, when I took the dogs into school, that certain types of hand sanitizers, the dogs were backing away from the pupils. Whatever's in them, I don't know, but the dogs did not like them.
Stuart, do you want to pick up on that one?
Did you raise that with the school then, or?
Yes, but just, I don't know if anyone else has found this, but the dogs literally walked backwards away from the pupils.
Yeah, maybe
we
the
had
smell
to wait.
or something like that. Yeah,
we did have to wait until the smell had really died down.
And all the dogs are in the same boat?
I've got 2 dogs that I take in.
Oh, just the 2 dogs, but they both
they don't go
the
together,
way.
but they both have done the same thing. So I don't actually know which kind of sanitizer the school was using.
I would imagine maybe more the smell than anything else, because dogs have such an acute sense of smell, of course. So I suppose the answer to that would be to
just
ask
because
the school to use something a bit more bland, perhaps.
But just it might make it more prevalent now, because people are using it a lot more. That we might find it can become a problem.
Okay,
interesting point. Thank you.
Thanks for that point, Sharon. Right, I've got a couple more questions. Oh, from a Gillian Henderson. Who is the rep for East Lothian? Mel, can you?
Right, well, we don't actually have an area rep right now for East Lothian. We have June Forson, who is doing our assessments for us. So Gillian, if you're looking for help with finding a place, or if you've just got questions, if you contact me or the office, then we'll help you out with that just now. We're still looking for someone to take on the organisation of all of that.
Okay. Thank you. I've a comment here from a Patricia McMahon. She's desperate to get back to visiting, but no one in her area seems to want us, but she's willing to travel. So I guess, Patricia, maybe that one should come via Mel in the office, and we can see if there's, depending on which area you're in, if there's anywhere that's looking for somebody out with your area. That would be great. Any other questions? Oh yeah, Catriona Stadden, can I just check who is the rep for the Borders, Mel?
Yes, the rep for the Borders is Marion. Marion's all of our, on our website actually, our area reps are, we've got a page that says about us, and there's a drop down menu, and it's got a list of like the trustee directors. The area reps is the first wee bar, and if you click on that, it's got a map of Scotland, and then all around it we've listed all the area reps. And if we haven't got an area rep in situ at this precise moment in time, then it usually says contact the office, and then they'll usually put you on to me or try and deal with it themselves. But yes, Marion is in the Borders. Her details are up on the website there. So if you send Marion an email, she'll get back in touch with you.
Okay, super. Thank you very much. I do not have any more questions in my little question box. I'm going to open the floor to our panelists if they've got any comments prior to me closing this up. One of the things I'd like to say is the people that are still here, obviously as attendees, we're being delighted to see so many people join. If you think this was a worthwhile thing to have done and you'd like to see this happen again, maybe with, you know, different guest speaker, different panelists, you know, please get in touch with us and let us know if you thought this was a valuable thing to have done. But I'm going to open up the mics to Hazel, Stuart, James and Mel. Anybody, any comments? Hazel.
Yeah, I had a nice wee story which James knows, in case people were worried about their dogs wanting to go back to visits. My dog went missing in the park when my husband was watching walking her, and the park is connected, but it's a long way away from the hospice we visit, and she's never gone to the hospice via the park. Anyway, I got a phone call from the hospice to say, was I with the dog? But no, I wasn't. She'd found her way across the entire park. She'd got in the front door of the hospice and gone down to the wards, where she was found by the nurses. So if anybody has got any doubts over whether their dogs have missed that, there's a nice wee story. It may have been the custard creams that she gets there, but it's quite impressive.
I love that. That's brilliant. Brilliant. James.
No, that's fine. It's Twiggy, the dog Hazel's talking about. Just she's been in there or visiting there a long time, and it just shows she knew where she was going, possibly because of the custard creams. Please, what I would say to the volunteers is contact if you are happy to go back, and only if you're happy to go back visiting. As Mel had said earlier, contact the placements that you're due to go in. Some of the questions you should be asking them: what are the requirements of yourself for visiting? Have I got to wear a face mask if I can? Do I have to do a lateral flow test and prove that I've done it beforehand? And how many people can I meet? Please remember, if they mention social distancing at all, if the social distancing is 2 meters or less, if it's 2 meters, we cannot visit because we cannot keep the dogs safe. So it really has to be 1 meter or less for the visit to take place, and that is either outside or inside. That is what the requirements are. And sanitize your hands before you go in, and sanitize your hands during, and sanitize your hands once you're making your way back to your car or getting on the bus, using the placement sanitizer or your own. A wee thing that Sharon mentioned about the school, what I have noticed in the school visits that I've done is the pupils are using their own sanitizer. Now that is completely different from the sanitizer that the schools themselves put out. So that is quite a hard one. But as Stuart said, what I would do is, if you see a pupil, using sanitizer, just delay when they go to put their hand out to touch the dog, so that it's kind of evaporated away. That's what I can suggest to do with that.
Cool, thank you. Stuart, any final comments from yourself?
Yeah, there's one question that I was sort of anticipating, and it's sort of meant to bring it up earlier, and it was actually in Hazel's excellent talk, and that was the need to, is there a need to, almost bath your dog before and after the visit? And Hazel, very rightly said that there really has to be a fairly massive, viral load for virus to be passed, because it is a respiratory disease. For it to be passed from a dog's skin to hands, to nose to cause infection, and provided all the sanitizing of hands and things according to what we've largely discussed tonight takes place, then there really should be no need to bath dogs. And that is the BVA, the British Veterinary Association's guidance as well on their notes. It's exactly as Hazel said. So some people like to bath their dogs before and after visits anyway, and always have done, you know, and it's a kind of pride thing. But from a dog's health point of view, it's not that great thing to do really, because the more you bath the dog, the more you wash out natural, you know, elements from the coat and leave them kind of vulnerable to skin disease. So I think the message there is just endorsing what Hazel said in her talk, and I think you know, bathing a dog beforehand and afterwards is probably a bit unnecessary. Otherwise, I've nothing further to add there.
Okay, super. That's you know, a very good comment. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've got some lovely comments in the chat box, people saying that they found this very interesting and it's good to hear what their dogs have been doing, good to hear what's happening outside their own dogs' bubbles, and yeah, it would be a good idea to do it again. So on behalf of my panellists, Hazel, Mel, Stuart and James, I'd like to thank you all very much for attending. I'd like to thank you for your comments, and I'd like to thank you for your questions, and until next time, we will end the webinar here, and thank you so much for your time. Goodbye.